Okay, so right here we have all the players that Ten Hag knows about because of his time managing back in the Netherlands. And here we have a picture of all of Manchester United's top transfer targets. Corporate is asking you to find the differences between these two pictures. They're the same picture. Sir Alex Ferguson is more than just a living legend to Manchester United. He was the godfather of the club, a deity-like entity who ran the institution from top to bottom. He was handed the keys to the club and went on to shape Manchester United solely in his image, turning them into an iconic English footballing institution and at various points over his career, champions of Europe and the best club in world football. For all those that worked around him, their job was extremely simple: back the manager. Whether you were a player, a coach, or in charge of the finances, the modus operandi was simple. You do whatever you can to get Sir Alex Ferguson whatever he needs. And when they did, he in turn won them everything on the pitch. Even putting it this way feels like putting it mildly. It feels like his reach extended even further beyond things merely related to the football. Alex Ferguson's hold over the club seeps into every seat, into every brick, and into every slate of Old Trafford's leaky roof. Manchester United find themselves 10 years on from his departure, and while no one truly expected a completely smooth transition, the club are still dealing with a throbbing headache from the worst hangover of all time. The once Champions League knockout stage regulars now find themselves battling each season to even qualify for the tournament. The once perpetual domestic league title favourites now find themselves consistently outclassed by rivals Manchester City. Manchester United need fixing. So, let's try and fix them. If your timeline algorithms are attuned to a certain frequency, logging on to social media following a Manchester United defeat will seem akin to the sky falling down. Every Manchester United defeat is met with a barrage of instantaneous knee-jerk reactions, often proclaiming that the club is finished, every player is non-league level and needs to be sold off, and no other club in the league has it worse. Any level head knows that this is objectively false. No, Manchester United are not where they once were, but to claim the club needs a total facelift across all departments to salvage any hope is an overstatement. So before we dive deeper into how we fix Manchester United, let's look at what needs fixing. As unromantic as it may be to say, financial power is the most important factor in determining how sustainably successful a club could ever hope to be. And in this regard, Manchester United are golden. According to FBref, who work in partnership with a company called Capology, who use insider information to log player salaries, Manchester United are listed as having the highest wage bill in the league for the 2023-24 season. Yes, there is some estimation going on here with some of the exact numbers. Player wages are not disclosed as public information, of course, but it's safe to say that Manchester United have the highest, or at least the second highest, wage bill in the league. From just a revenue perspective, until just recently when Manchester City posted their financial accounts following the 2022-23 season, Manchester United could boast the highest ever revenue in England and new club records for commercial and matchday incomings. Due to a severe lack of nuance in footballing discourse, when people label a club as being in crisis, they can both mean a situation like Macclesfield Town, who ceased to exist in 2020 due to their financial troubles, and Manchester United, who sometimes don't win every football match. Still, what's important to note here is that Manchester United have not found their slump in success coinciding with a slump in revenue, commercial or financial health. To compete for the Premier League and for the Champions League, you simply must have the financial muscle to build a squad to sustainably do so. And apart from potentially Manchester City, Manchester United, on paper, are actually in the best position to do so in England. Which brings us on to the ownership. Fingers are pointed towards the Glazers following every Manchester United loss, and as majority owners of the football club, they therefore must harbour some of the responsibility. However, just how much, I'm not so sure. United fans will consistently claim that it all starts at the top, that they set the culture, and that they haven't done enough to support the team. There is this idea, and I must say it's mostly just from United fans, that Manchester United will simply never be successful until they go. As just covered with that brief look at Manchester United's financial health, I'm not entirely sure that's the case. Yes, the Glazers are by no means perfect. They are not a dream set of owners, and they are not necessarily the blueprint for all owners to aspire to. But at the same time, they are an ownership that, even without major injections of their own capital, have led the Manchester United charge to becoming one of the top 2 richest clubs in the country. Manchester United have the highest wage bill in the league, the best revenue streams in the league, some of the most lucrative sponsorship and kit deals, and all in all are in good financial health for the future. I'm aware the bar is low, but you could do a lot worse than a relatively hands-off, quiet, unproblematic administration of a club who have helped steer them into becoming one of the richest clubs on the planet. Okay, Old Trafford needs fixing. The leaky roof is embarrassing for a stadium as culturally significant and as iconic as it is. Yes, the training facilities need an update to be in line with their compatriots in the league. But if we're focusing about the resources needed to compete with the very best on the pitch, under Glazers' ownership, Manchester United are in a position to do so. Manchester United spend money, eye-watering sums of money, every single transfer window. They pay their players unbelievable amounts of money. And as seen time and time again, each time the transfer window opens, Manchester United, under Glazer ownership, remains a highly enticing and desirable place for elite footballers across the world. And they've done it all without any PR disasters, without personally authorising any disgusting human rights abuses, and without cooking the accounting books. Right now, Manchester City have 115 charges of breaching Premier League financial fair play slapped on them, and Chelsea are being investigated for Abramovich's dodgy dealings. United have just as many resources to compete with both of those teams without the uncertain future ahead. And just quickly, I think it's ridiculous the amount of support I've seen regarding a potential Saudi takeover. I cannot believe that a British institution as iconic and as significant as Manchester United was ever considered to be up for sale to a power-hungry, no connection to the club, human rights abusing oil state, let alone people out here celebrating their potential power grab. At least it seems like this isn't happening anymore, so I'll leave it for now. In conclusion, while of course the ownership must share responsibility, it's not the ownership's job to pick the team. It's not the ownership's job to pick the manager, scout the transfer market, or meddle with player negotiations or intra-squad relationships. It's the ownership's responsibility, in my opinion at least, to run the club in a way that allows healthy support to the footballing director and in turn the manager and in turn the team. I know there'll be a lot of United fans screaming at me down in the comment section right now, but look, Erik ten Hag falls out with Sancho and ostracises him from the club, and the owners don't get involved because they are totally behind the manager. Erik ten Hag wants Mason Mount for £60 million, and the owners sign off on it because they are totally behind their manager. It might not seem like a lot, but when compared to many other football owners across the world, you can't really ask for a whole lot more. While, as I've already stated, I do admit that there are things they could do differently, and they are by no means perfect. There is nothing that the Glazers specifically do in their ownership of the football club that unequivocally makes Manchester United's ability to compete impossible. The fact of the matter is, since Alex Ferguson's departure, the numbers on the accounting books dictate that the club should be competing for the highest honours, but on the pitch, the club have found it incredibly difficult to do so. The reason I started this video with a word on Sir Alex is that his aura still lingers around Manchester United in every aspect of the way the club strategises and operates. Back in the late 90s and the mid 2000s, the plan was simple: back the manager and he'll do the rest. Even in Sir Alex's departing farewell speech to Old Trafford, he famously stated that it was now the fans' duty to back the incoming David Moyes, a manager hired off the back of Alex Ferguson telling the club to do so. The Manchester United board were so committed to backing Alex Ferguson that they even did so with his own exit plan. And don't get me wrong, this was a good thing. Manchester United unconditionally supporting the manager made them the biggest, richest and most successful club in England, even the world at various points. But this was the end of an era, both in the sense of a change in manager and a shift in the way elite football clubs are run, and I can't help but feel that United are too stuck in their traditional mindset. I think that sometimes there's a sentiment that the people in charge of United, and there's been a lot of change in that regard, and with Jim Radcliffe's bid, even more change looks to be coming on the horizon, simply don't care about United. But I find this very hard to believe. Moyes, Van Gaal, Mourinho, Solskjaer and Ten Hag have all been backed to the tune of millions upon millions of pounds in each transfer window. Back in 2022, a video was leaked online of then Manchester United CEO Richard Arnold talking to some disgruntled United fans in a pub. He states that money is, quote, not a consideration if the manager wants a player, whether it's, quote, 100 million or 200 million. He then takes a jab at former chief executive Ed Woodward, who he accuses of not backing a manager enough and buying the players he wanted over the manager's direction. But herein lies Manchester United's fundamental issue, and that's their continued blind devotion to backing the manager over any sense of a club plan, strategy or process to get things back on track. Van Gaal becomes the manager in 2014 and brings in Daley Blind, Memphis Depay and Schweinsteiger because Van Gaal wanted them after experiencing working alongside them with his time at Bayern Munich and the Dutch national team. Then Van Gaal is sacked and Mourinho comes in. He doesn't want any of those Van Gaal players, so the club back the manager once more, and in comes Mourinho's targets, Pogba and Lukaku for crazy money, Alexis Sanchez, Eric Bailly and a 31-year-old Matic, as Mourinho had worked with him at Chelsea. But then Mourinho goes and Solskjaer comes in. The pattern continues, we have to back the manager. Sancho for crazy money, Harry Maguire on massive money, Daniel James after a recommendation from Solskjaer's mate Ryan Giggs, who worked with him in the Wales national setup. He gets the sack, so in comes Ten Hag in the summer of 2022. It's been 10 years since Alex Ferguson's departure. Ten Hag wants specific players that he's either worked with or have seen firsthand from the Dutch First Division: Wout Weghorst, Tyrell Malacia, Lisandro Martinez and Antony for a staggering £80 million. Just where is the project here? Where is the foresight and the planning or any sense of a transfer or squad building strategy? Things change in football extremely quickly. Results can change unexpectedly and a manager might not end up being the best fit for the club. And it's an extremely dangerous game in modern football to simply throw money at all the targets the manager dictates. Because, of course, managers are always going to want players they've either had before or have seen firsthand play against their sides. But times have changed, and managers are simply too busy and too preoccupied to also act as football scouts. At the top of elite modern football are clubs with complex and sophisticated scouting divisions whose analytic teams crunch the numbers, unearth hidden talent, and provide better value options for roles that need to be filled in the team. But Manchester United seemingly just buy whoever Ten Hag wants because of this dedicated culture of backing the manager. It's almost admirable, if it wasn't so foolish, to see a club's steadfast devotion to this methodology. While the rest of football has moved on, United still believes that whoever is in charge of the first team becomes the godfather and gains control over every single aspect of the club. Hey, it worked when we did it for Alex Ferguson. We just got to keep doing it until we find another Alex Ferguson or something. And the thing is, I'm undoubtedly sure that the scouting division at a club like Manchester United is first rate. It's hard to identify how good a scouting or analytic department is across football clubs. The success of a transfer is down to many unmeasurable factors, both on and off the field. But it's Manchester United. They have the resources and the name to pull in top talent, and I have no doubt that they have. The question is, are they even listened to? Because sometimes it really doesn't feel that way. It doesn't matter how much money you generate as a club if you waste it all away. Going back to that strange Richard Arnold leaked pub chat, he says so himself, literally saying that they've pissed money away and it's hard to see where all this money spent has gone. It's led to an incredibly disjointed and fractured squad that more resembles a 12-year-old buying a bunch of his favourite players on FIFA Ultimate Team than a coherent plan. The squad is a jumble of favoured players hanging around like ghosts, brought in by managers that have now long gone. Maguire and McTominay were key men under Solskjaer, but Ten Hag didn't like them, so relegated them both to reserve roles, only to then have to U-turn and bring them back into the starting 11. Solskjaer's final season at the club saw huge amounts of money spent on Sancho, Varane, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Elanga was promoted to the first team from the under-23s. A season later, all four of these players have either left the club or are no longer in a first-choice starting 11. Martial is still somehow at the club, and where to even start with someone like Donny van de Beek? It gets worse because when the holes in the squad become obvious, Manchester United rush to fill them with whatever body they can. They must back the manager, remember? Lukaku didn't work for Solskjaer, so in comes temporary striker Odion Ighalo in January. He didn't work out, so in comes Cavani as a temporary striker until they could find a permanent target. Once his time ended, United still needed a number 9 and they couldn't possibly let Cristiano Ronaldo join Manchester City, so a 36-year-old Ronaldo comes in. Solskjaer goes and Ten Hag comes in his place. A fallout with Ronaldo saw Weghorst come in as a temporary replacement. Even if there wasn't a huge outlay on transfer fees for all of these players, how much money on loan fees, agent fees and wages has been wasted in last-minute transfers to fill gaps in the squad? And this is just one position of the team. You could extrapolate this across practically the whole squad. United failed to sign Frenkie de Jong. Okay, disappointing, but even the best teams miss out on transfer targets all the time. Is there no other player in the world with similar attributes that could fill a similar role? Instead, £70 million are dropped on Casemiro, a player who plays nothing like Frenkie de Jong, was 30 years old at the time, and has basically no resale value. Casemiro had a great first season at the club, but it shouldn't be a shock to anyone that now, at 31 years old, and with 39,000 minutes in his legs, he seems to be struggling with the pace of the Premier League. But Casemiro at least gave them a great first season and some time to find their Frenkie de Jong alternative. But did they? No. Instead, temporary midfield cover Amrabat is brought in on loan at the last minute from Fiorentina. Hopefully you can understand what I mean now. The squad is a revolving door of highly specific players bought for highly specific managers, with no foresight or long-term thinking, no consideration regarding wage structure, age profile, or attribute balance. Even behind the scenes, everything feels like they're just making it all up on the spot. Solskjaer brought in as a caretaker, but then given the job permanently. Rangnick brought in as a temporary manager, replacing the last guy they thought would be temporary, with the idea that he'll slip into a director of football role once they sign a permanent manager, but then Ten Hag comes in and Rangnick is removed completely. Back in 2017, Jurgen Klopp joined Liverpool as first-team manager. According to The Athletic, his first major transfer target he wanted through the door was Borussia Dortmund player Julian Brandt, who Klopp had worked alongside during his time as Dortmund manager. However, Liverpool sporting director Michael Edwards, backed by his scouting and recruitment team, felt that Brandt was overvalued and they should be looking at an alternative target. In the end, Klopp was convinced by the new proposal and dropped his main target and went with the recommendation from Edwards. Liverpool instead signed Mohamed Salah for £40 million from Roma, and I think it went pretty well for them both in the end. It's highly speculated that Liverpool missed out on other targets around this time too. Klopp had been said to favour the likes of Mario Götze and Timo Werner, players he knew very well from his time in the Bundesliga. And once it became clear that it was unfeasible to bring in these players for fees that would be reasonable, Liverpool changed tact and signed backup targets instead in Sadio Mane and Diogo Jota. I heard those two turned out to do pretty decently in the end. It's 2023. I'm fully of the belief that managers need to be head coaches of a football team and uninvolved in scouting and transfer targets. We live in a world where a scouting team can pull up any game featuring any player anywhere in the world in an instant and get down to analysing. Elite clubs across the world are in a race to unearth the hidden gems, find value, and correctly risk assess the viability that any given transfer will work out, and United are trailing far behind. In conclusion, Manchester United have found themselves stuck in a cycle of their own doing. They hire a manager who they then allow to have far too much control over too many aspects of their club. He inherits a disjointed squad full of highly specific system players from previous regimes, so said manager then demands further specific players. These demands aren't questioned and the club spends hundreds of millions of pounds to obtain them. The squad becomes even more imbalanced and lacking synergy, and results start to suffer. In an attempt to not let things slide any further, more expensive last-minute transfers are brought in to try and fill holes in the squad. This leads to even further imbalances in the squad. The manager is eventually sacked as none of this is inducive of good results, and the cycle restarts. So how do Manchester United go about fixing this? Well, firstly, it's important to acknowledge that the current landscape really isn't all that bad. The way people talk about United often makes it seem like they're battling for relegation and close to administration, and while they're obviously not as successful as they once were, there's still a good foundation to be found here. Firstly, they have a squad worth around £1 billion. As covered, this squad is imbalanced and unfocused, but it is still full of elite footballers who, on their day, could win them any given game. Due to the reasons I've already covered, practically every player in this United side has gone through a spell where they've played poorly, but the fact of the matter is that players like Bruno Fernandes, Luke Shaw, Wan-Bissaka, Rashford, Onana, Maguire, Casemiro, Mount and Eriksen are all proven top talents. Even if it may not seem like it, I'd argue that more often than not, United go into a domestic game with a better talent pool than their opponents. Secondly, they have Carrington. Although it's an academy that in modern times seems to be overshadowed by the likes of Manchester City's or Chelsea's, the United youth setup still has produced an influx of Premier League quality players, which is more than can be said for many other youth setups in the league. Rashford, McTominay, Garnacho Hannibal and Mainu have all found themselves playing first-team football for Manchester United this season, which is impressive, even without counting the amount of money the academy has generated by selling talents to other clubs. Carrington simultaneously acts as both a backbone that produces players at an elite level to help the team, and as a serious money machine, and it can't be underestimated the advantage this gives United over other teams in the league. And thirdly, it's important to realise that United really aren't that far away, and it's never as bad as it seems. Again, I know it can often seem like they are. A run of poor results always leads to calls of selling the whole first team squad and starting again, but we've seen several times over Premier League history how quickly things can change, even with just one or two essential signings that raise the ceiling of a team. Very few people would have predicted Liverpool's meteoric rise to title contenders and then title winners shortly after Klopp's arrival, but the signings of Virgil van Dijk, Mohamed Salah and Alisson propelled them immediately to new heights. Players play better when playing with better players. The idea that United need 8 or 9 first-team orientated transfers to compete is a fallacy. Just a few of the right players at the right time and for the right price will produce exponential results across the whole squad. And lastly, United have the funds to do all this. However badly out of shape this has all gotten, United's money allows them to simply go again. Manchester United are a club that can buy Sancho for £70 million and then afford to let him waste away in the reserves. Although, as I've already argued, Manchester United have used their wealth incredibly ineffectively since the days of Alex Ferguson, the money is still there to try again. In fact, United are so secure financially that they can afford multiple future failures on top of the multitude of failures they've already had. This is the sort of thing that separates the big boys from the mid-table ones. In this modern day Premier League era, where all the teams pull in outrageous amounts of money, mostly in part due to the fairness of the way the Premier League distributes its lucrative TV deals, most clubs have the capacity to spend big on a player or two. The difference is it's a huge risk for many clubs to spend 50, 60, 70 million on a player, as it's financially crippling if it doesn't work out. The risk is mitigated for United as they can afford to fail repeatedly for the foreseeable future. And with all that said, the number one most important thing that United must do to fix their club to compete for the Premier League title and to rise once again as one of the best teams in the world is to accept being bad for a while. No more talk of the United way, no more talk about standards or history or look how far we've fallen or we're not where we should be and all of the rest. Just be bad. As the last decade since Ferguson's departure has proven, you cannot truly reset when you're constantly firefighting, panicking and chopping and changing. United need to accept that the culture isn't where it needs to be, the wage structure isn't correct, and the squad isn't good enough to win the league or the Champions League, and those things cannot be fixed by throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks. It takes time and a clear and fully thought through procedure. The director of football, whoever that may be, needs to work with the manager, whoever that may be, to devise a plan not to compete and to win now, but to build a team that can sustainably compete for the future. The thing about the United way is that, well, it never really meant anything. United have never been a club wedded to one style or one way of playing. United have always just been a club about winning. And in this case, I think that's a good thing. United have a chance here to find an identity and a philosophy and a way of playing and then point all aspects of the club towards that goal. Manchester United shouldn't be looking for a Casemiro or a Sancho replacement, and they shouldn't be trying to tempt Frankie de Jong again. The club needs to be looking towards the future and unearthing value before these players have breakout seasons out of the clubs. If you can't get de Jong, who's the next de Jong? who has the potential to match his playstyle and talent in the future. And at the same time, the club needs to look at their current squad and make big decisions accordingly. David De Gea, for as good of a career as he has had and as good as a shot stopper as he might have been, was never ever good enough with the ball at his feet to allow Manchester United to be an elite side at playing out from the back. Now eventually replaced by Onana, De Gea is an example of a player who was allowed to hang around for too long over fears of releasing a good player, even if he wasn't a fit for the style. No one should be safe. Marcus Rashford has gone through phases in his career where he has shown he can be a fantastic player. But is he the right type of player for the style of play the club is looking to implement? Maybe, maybe not. What about Bruno Fernandes, Wan-Bissaka or Maguire? United need a reset and a re-evaluation of all of its parts, and they mustn't be scared to rustle feathers, take risks, or worry about the short-term results. United have the pull and the finances to afford to let results slip for 2, 3 or 4 years, and doing so will allow them to fully commit to building a balanced team that is tailored to playing in a highly specific style, coached by the manager. This may all seem like fairy tale stuff. Very few of the established elite clubs in world football would allow results to slip for an extended period of time without hitting the panic button, but a look across to North London shows you exactly what can be achieved with aligned forward thinking. Arsenal Football Club found themselves in a similar position to Manchester United following Arsene Wenger's retirement from management. Like Ferguson, Wenger acted as a similar godfather figure at Arsenal, as he was fully backed in all ways by the club and given the keys to run the club as he saw fit from top to bottom. Following Arsene's departure, Arsenal looked to be slipping down a similar path as United, with Emery, chosen as Arsene's successor, sacked after a couple of seasons as reality started to set in. Big money was spent on high-profile, wage-costly players as Arsenal quickly tried to fix holes in the squad to not allow things to slip further. Pepe for 80 million, Willian, David Luiz, Socrates, Cedric Suarez, Pablo Mari, none of whom ended up working out. But interestingly, rather than sack Arteta and try again in the transfer market, Arsenal decided to back the man they said they would back and plan for the future. Over the course of 3 years, Arsenal reshaped their squad totally in Edu and Arteta's image. Aubameyang stripped of the captaincy and then sold. Lacazette sold. Willian and Luiz gone. Ozil gone. Iwobi gone. Ospina and Martinez and Guendouzi and Jenkinson all gone. No one was safe. First team regulars under Emery, such as Leno, Torreira and Bellerin, all gone. And in their place, Arsenal, for the most part, recruited smartly with a huge focus on value for money, the wage structure and age profile. Saka and Smith Rowe evaluated and then promoted from the academy. Tomiyasu for 15 million from Bologna. A young French centre-back called Saliba for a reasonable 27 million from Saint-Etienne. Gabriel from Lille for around 20 million. Aaron Ramsdale on a cut price fee from relegated Sheffield United. And some guy called Gabriel Martinelli that no one had ever heard of for 6 million from Brazil. Even when they bought established Premier League names, the aligned thinking regarding their suitability for Arteta's playstyle and their value and age were plain to see. Ben White and Odegaard weren't signed for hundreds of millions of pounds. Jesus and Zinchenko were castaways from City. How many of the players I've just listed were simply unobtainable for Manchester United? And how many of those players would get into the current United squad? While Arsenal were building a synergised, balanced machine, United were spending hundreds of millions of pounds on players like Fred and Van de Beek and Antony, while also signing stopgap after stopgap in Cavani, Ronaldo and Weghorst. Of course, during this process, Arsenal's results slipped dramatically. Do not forget, Arsenal under Arteta finished 8th, 8th again, and then bottled Champions League qualification on the final day of the season to Spurs. But now, well, look at them. The Arteta project at Arsenal has exploded because the club has allowed a downturn in short-term success to set themselves up for an exciting future. Would Manchester United allow the club to finish 8th in successive seasons, or would they panic and fire the manager and drop another 100 million on whatever specific player they are now convinced will save the club? The days of simply buying the best players in the league and steamrolling teams are over for Manchester United. At one stage, United could wait until Robin van Persie had his breakout season for Arsenal and then enter the market for him. United could wait until Berbatov established himself at Spurs and then enter the market for him. Those days are truly gone. And if United want to sustainably get to the level that City are now, they need to sacrifice short-term gains for long-term success, no matter how painful that may be. When Manchester United chose Erik ten Hag to succeed Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, they would have done so because they admired the way his Ajax side played and the success that they achieved. In selecting Ten Hag, United did so in the hopes that he could replicate his style and his accomplishments to Manchester. After losing 8 of their first 15 matches so far this season, Ten Hag came out and blatantly stated that his side, quote, can't play like Ajax because we don't have the players. And he's totally right. As outlined throughout this video, the United squad is by no means a bad one, but by no means is it tailored to replicate the great Ajax side who had so much success under Ten Hag. There has been a lot of talk about United's worrying start to the season and if it is acceptable for a club of their stature. But the real worry is the fact that these questions are even being asked. Forget the first 13 games, forget the first 30 games, forget the first 100 games. Worry about the 200th and beyond. Just as I finished writing this, Arteta has overseen his 200th game in charge for Arsenal, a 1-0 win away against Brentford, which sees his side sit top of the Premier League and right in the hunt for the Premier League title in back-to-back seasons. And I see no reason that this couldn't be Manchester United if they can take a step back and allow for a properly aligned reset. The question is, can they hold their nerve if the short-term results aren't going so well and they start slipping down the table in pursuit of a brighter future? Okay, forget everything I've just said. I've got a better idea. Why don't they just bring back Paul Pogba once again?